Welcome back, friends, to another New World video. Today we're going to be talking about the best perks in New World, and to have it be a little bit more fun, we're also going to structure it into a tier list as well. So whether it comes to a pair of boots, or your ring, or your weapon, what are the 3 best perks that you typically want to be seeing on that piece of gear? Or maybe if you have an artifact and you haven't upgraded it yet, what is the final, what is an S tier perk that you could put on down there? Now, best in slot and best in New World is subjective. Different players are going to have different opinions. There is also the concept of both PvE and PvP. For example, a perk like Freedom, pretty solid in PvP. I think a lot of PvPers will rate this very highly, but in PvE, its value, it's okay, but it's certainly not like an S tier perk in my opinion. So with that concept in mind, we have created this tier list, and it's going to be based off of PvE and sort of expeditions. If you're going to an M3, what are the sort of pieces of gear that you want to see on your armor, and then your amulets, your ring, your earring, and then finally we've done a separate section for ability perks as well. Your fortifying sacred ground, your crippling reap, your fortifying perforate, or those perks on the armor. We do have a whole separate other spreadsheet for perks on weapons as well, and I think I'm probably going to do a separate video for that aspect because, I'm already expecting, looking at the sheer amount of perks here, we're going to try and go over them fairly quickly, but there is a lot of perks in New World. So like I say, we'll probably be breaking it up into 2 videos, one for weapons and then the other one for armor, jewelry, and I guess ability perks on the armor as well. If there's a particular section you guys are interested in, you can scrub along the video down below. We're going to start with the armor, then we'll go over to the jewelry, and then we'll talk about the ability perks. There is, again, going to be some variation in here, and I do want to say, if you are somebody who loves the luck perk, for example, and you're upset that I give it a D tier, leave a comment down below. Engagement in this video, defend that luck, or you can hop into the stream, and we can continue the discussion over there as well. Links to the stream in the description down below, along with these spreadsheets if you want to take a look through for yourself for your own records. I am going to be trying to update these as Amazon continue to add and tweak perks in the game. So let's start off with our armor perks. At S tier, I have Health, Enchanted Ward, Elemental Aversion, Refreshing, and Grit Ward. Now, Grit Ward is a bit situational. I think this is something that would only be S tier if it was on a heavy piece of gear. Grit Ward gives you damage reduction when you have grit, which is usually obtained by getting 300 Constitution. There's a few other ways to get it as well, but 300 Con is typically the way to do it. And in PvE, 300 Con basically is tank territory. So tanks like Grit Ward, it's just straight up damage reduction if you have Grit. When it comes to the other perks, Health, this is a little bit of a controversial one, interestingly enough, and I think largely that's due to the fact that the craft mod that gives you health is so expensive, and people want to look for a reason to justify not buying it because, it costs so much. But by the time this video comes out, or shortly after this video comes out, Season 4 will be in New World, and the price of adamant should be dropping significantly, which means you will be able to put health on your armor much easier. Now, one thing that I do want to cover here, and I don't really want to go too in depth, but when you take a look at something like Enchanted Ward, which gives you less damage from light and heavy attacks, this is very consistent because a lot of New World's damage is light and heavy attacks. The problem with Enchanted Ward is it has a label. It's categorized as damage absorb. And if we go in here, these are all the other things that are also categorized as damage absorb. And what that means, we can show it in the game because it'll probably be easier. If we try and add in 2 perks, or if we try and add in Enchanted Ward and Elemental Aversion, which are both great ways to reduce incoming damage, and then we say we only want those perks, the game will say, you can't have that. It has to be one or the other because they're in the same category effectively. But when we go back to health, for example, the only other perk that is in the same bucket as health or has the same label is another perk called health, which is on your amulet. So you don't even have to worry about this crossing over. So health doesn't compete with anything else, whereas Enchanted Ward, Elemental Aversion do. There is some rarities, like with some certain artifacts and items in the game where you can have both of them, but that's one of the reasons that makes health so good. It also doesn't really have any criteria. Whilst Enchanted Ward, Elemental Aversion are just great for reducing damage from light and heavy attacks or magical abilities, it works in mutations with Enchanted Ward. Health, just good everywhere. It doesn't matter if you PvP, you PvE, you solo, you're in a group, just having a bigger health pool kind of benefits everybody. The more Constitution you take, the more value you get out of the perks. So yeah, just having a bigger health pool turns out to be pretty good. It's like, there's no criteria. It's not like Grit Ward where you have to have grit. Again, it doesn't require light or heavy attacks or abilities, just always active, always having a bigger health pool. everybody can benefit from that. Refreshing is another perk that we didn't really cover too much here. Refreshing gives you cooldown reduction. Most classes typically want to be stacking 4 refreshing, so any piece of armor you have that has refreshing on is looking pretty valuable. Now this does have a cap, unlike these other perks where you can put as many as you want on. You can have it on all 5 pieces of armor. Refreshing does have a cap of 4, and I do think it is a pretty good move to put refreshing on your earring. We'll talk more about that when we get to the section. So refreshing does have some limitations, but I still would consider it an S tier perk. So any combination of these up here is going to make your piece of armor very valuable and indeed a good piece to be wearing most of the time. Grip Ward, of course, though, you want to be looking for it on a heavy armor piece. I think that's, you know, the criteria that we're going to put there. Now moving over to A tier for perks on PvE armor, we have Shirking Fortification. This is generally going to be better on medium and heavy. I don't put it in S tier because it has, again, more of a criteria. You have to be dodging an enemy attack, and this is something that if you're a DPS player or a healer player, the enemy's usually facing away from you. The tank has the enemy facing towards them. It is still a good perk. Fortify and having extra armor is great, but I can't put it on S tier because it is more situational, and again, you need to have armor in the first place to take advantage of Shirking Fortification, and a lot of players play in light. And actually, as I'm saying this, I think I'm going to drop it down to a C tier. So we're going to do a live change here on the video right now because I think it is quite situational. You know, the enemy's got to be facing towards you. You need to be wearing like a decent amount of armor, and those things typically don't happen in a mutated expedition. Other than the tank, who has full heavy, most of the players are playing in light for the maximal DPS. So yeah, Shirking Fortification moving down to a B. However, Slash Conditioning, Thrust Conditioning, I do think are pretty solid perks. Slash and Thrust damage is seen pretty often. There's quite a lot of enemies that do it. So with spears, with swords, those are slashing with great axes. Yeah, like I say, a lot of enemies do these types of damage, and every time you take that sort of damage, the next time you would take the damage, it's less frequent. Strike Conditioning, we'll cover it because it's also in the same pool. I put it down into a B tier because typically when you receive strike damage, it is like a big burst. You can think about the first boss of Garden of Genesis, the Angry Earth Vinesman, Alluvium Maul. He hits you for just like 15,000 damage, boom, straight up, and then Strike Conditioning kicks in, so the next time he hits you wouldn't be as bad, but it's because of the way strike damage typically works in New World, it's just a big burst, so it's not even active until after you've already taken the strike damage, whereas Thrust and Slash is usually smaller, more consistent hits where you can actually get value out of it, if that makes sense. Sturdy Energy is an A tier perk specifically for tanks. You would typically want to see this on a heavy chest for tanks, so you get stamina regen. It is a great perk there, so that's why we slap Sturdy Energy. Heavy chests, great perk for tank. Honestly, maybe even an S tier. I don't think they absolutely have to have the perk, but it is a great one to have for those tanky boys. Moving into our B tier perks. Now these are perks that are pretty good. They're not like, you know, it's not something to get super excited about, but if you have these perks on your gear, it's not like bad either. They're just like, okay, this is the middle of the road. This is, again, not super exciting, but it's not terrible. You certainly don't want to like salvage it. You would probably get a decent amount off for the trading post if you had some of these perks on the gear. So starting with the top here in alphabetical order, we've got our elemental harnessing. So this is fire harnessing, frost harnessing, void harnessing. Some people do consider these perks very valuable. One of the things to consider with the fire harnessing or whatever, and I have left a little note here because something like void harnessing, you know, it's a bit more situational. There's a lot of fire staffs out there, but not so much void gauntlets. And when the void gauntlet is being used, it's on the healer, and the healer isn't really doing that much damage. So, you know, it is situational. It's sometimes the perk might be valued higher, but just to sort of keep it middle of the road, they do go towards the empower cap as well. Empower, when you use a honing stone, and quite a few other abilities in the game, they can increase the amount of damage that you do temporarily, but it caps out at 50%. And if you have harnessing on every single piece of gear, you're already at 10% towards the empower cap. If you have a sword in your party, somebody playing with leadership, which is on the sword skill tree, there's another 10% empower over there as well. So very quickly, you can actually get to the empower cap pretty quickly, and often just turns out that harnessing is a little bit overkill because it would be better off if it was just, you know, Enchanted Ward, Elemental Aversion, Health, or Refreshing, in my opinion. Moving down to Freedom, we already talked about this earlier. It's great in PvP, but in PvE, you don't really need to get up stun slows or roots that much. There are a few situations, like in Empyrean Forge, where you get shield bash that could be pretty good. So it's not a bad perk, but it's not a particularly insane perk either. The same with Physical Aversion. Unlike Elemental Aversion, Physical Aversion just doesn't happen that often. There's a lot of magical damage in the game, especially right now with mutations and in PvP, but Physical Aversion pretty much just being bows and muskets and and maybe the occasional enemy using a blunderbuss, but that's not really something you see much in PvE, so whilst again it's not a bad perk, it's not particularly that exciting either. Shirking Energy, which is a perk that you can only get on your legs. It gives you stamina. In fact, let's just take a look at this one. If a hit is avoided by dodging while in a light equip load, you gain 16 stamina. Having stamina is good, but again, this is the sort of situation where if you're in a light equip load, you're typically not the tank. If you're not the tank, the enemies are hopefully going to be facing away from you. They're going to be facing towards the tank. You're going to be hitting the enemy in the back, so it's just hard to get this perk to proc or get that great value out of it in PvE because of the way that, you know, an optimal group would typically be run. Then we have Shirking Fortification. We already covered this one. It is situational depending on your armor load and strike conditioning. Again, it just you kind of need strike conditioning before you get hit with strike damage because it's usually big bursts. Moving on to the C tier, these are perks that are pretty crappy. They're not like terrible, but they are quite niche. They're quite situational. You have Vigor, Invigorated, and Elemental Conditioning. So Vigor reduces the duration of burn, bleed, and poison on you. It just turns out that, you know, you could have your healer Splash of Light this away. There's actually not that many burn, bleeds, and poisons that you get in PvE, and when you can, they can usually be cleansed by a healer or Purifying Toast. It's just, I think, in a world where you have the choice of these perks over here in S tier, I just can't see why you would want to take Vigor or Invigorated in PvE, like in almost all fights. The same with Elemental Conditioning. This perk can be really good depending on the sort of certain expedition that you're going in, but it's a pain in the butt to get this perk on your gear. And again, because there is a limited number of perks where you want to have a full set of refreshing. Typically you want to have refreshing on 3 to 4 pieces of armor. You want to get some elemental evasion in there, you want to get some health in there, you want to get your weapon perks in there. It just turns out that you don't often have room for Elemental Conditioning. So while it's not necessarily a bad perk, it's just not something that I would push out any of these other perks in B, A, or S tier for. Moving on to D tier, the stinkiest perks in New World, we have Empowering Breaker. I'm going to have to recap myself on this one. When your attacks are blocked, gain a stack of Empower, increasing damage by 4.2% for 5 seconds, and you can stack up to 5 times of this. But turns out there's not that many enemies in New World that block. There are a few, you know, if you were going into Lazarus, for example, there's quite a few shielded enemies in there, but there's also situations where there's just no enemies with shields at all, and this perk literally does nothing. So I think it's incredibly situational, and as a result, I'm going to be slapping it at the D tier. And then lastly, we have the ultimate troll perk here, which is Luck. Now, if you're doing chest runs or something like that, I'm sure Luck is great. You know, it's probably your best perk for that one. But if you're in a mutated expedition and you're bringing Luck gear, if you're putting Luck on your armor over any of these perks, like all of these other perks could increase your damage, or they could reduce the chances that you die. Luck does basically nothing for your team. It's a super selfish perk. I think in Mutated Expeditions, it's just, you just don't want to be running Luck. If anybody was to sign up to Group Finder and they linked me some Luck gear, I mean, I might accept them just because of the tenacity, the balls, but it's just not a good perk. I'm sorry, for Expeditions, it doesn't do anything to benefit the team. Right, moving over to our Amulet perks now. In S tier, we have Health. It's for the same reason that it's good on armor, just having health, having a bigger health pool, especially Amulet health. This is up to 7%, I want to say, when you have it max. Yeah, 7% extra health. Just good. Everybody could benefit from having extra health. Means you're less likely to die. It's your max health as well, not your base health. So I think this is just like a numero uno. If an amulet doesn't have health on it, it's often pretty trash, so I think this is like a must-have perk on the Amulet in my opinion. Other perks that you typically want to see alongside health are the Empowered perk. This is more for DPS than anyone else, but when you get Empowered, you can just make it last longer, so you can be doing more damage. Again, that's just great for DPS players. And then you have the Protection perk as well, and Protection perks is basically all of these bad boys here. So Flame, Frost, Nature, Void, Thrust, / Arcane, you get the idea. Arcane Protection doesn't really do anything right now. Lightning Protection is very situational as well, but certainly this sort of trifecta up here of Flame, Frost, Nature, and Void, these are solid perks. Honestly, just having health and then any one of these 4 is going to be great for mutations. They reduce fire damage by 15%, so if you're in a fire mutation, 15% less damage from pretty much all of the mechanics in the dungeon, with the exception of the bosses, unless it's Empyrean Forge. It's just really good. So health plus any one of these 4 protections, I think, already makes like an S tier amulet. And then the other perks that you want to be looking for to follow that up would be Empowered if you're a DPS player, and Stamina Recovery if you are a tank or a healer. I think, again, this is the sort of holy trinity: health, protection, and then either one of these 2 perks for a best in slot amulet. A tier perks that are also pretty good, but not as insane. You have Divine, extra incoming healing. Everybody everybody can benefit from this. It's not supposed to work with potions, but it currently does. I don't know if Amazon's ever going to bug fix that, but you do actually get extra healing from potions as well. Fortified makes fortifies last longer. This can be great for healers. If you have a healer in your party, they use Orb of Protection. You can get extra duration out of that. In particular, I think this is much more of a perk for tanks. Because they have typically a lot of ways to apply Fortify to themselves. And if they're fortified for longer, they're going to be taking less damage because it increases their armor, and tanks have more armor. So this is probably more of an A tier perk for tanks and B tier for healers or DPS, but I would say, you know, like I say, it's still a pretty solid perk. And then we have Refreshing Recovery. This is the one where when you drop below 50%, you get all of your cooldowns come back off so you can do them again. I think Stamina Recovery, because it's a 30-second cooldown rather than a 90-second cooldown, is just better because it's active more often, and getting a full stamina bar back is almost as good as getting all your abilities back. But it's still a pretty solid perk, so I'm going to give this one an A tier as well. Moving down to a B tier in New World of just good perks, not insane, but not terrible. We have the two Shirking Cleanses, removing dots and removing debilitates. Debilitating Cleanse is pretty situational. I might even be moving this. Yeah, I'm going to do it. I've decided we're going to be moving it down to a C tier. It's good at what it does, but not many people play in a medium equip load right now. It's usually either heavy for the tank or light for the DPS. So Shirking Dot Cleanse, we're going to leave just at B tier. Shirking Dot Cleanse, when you dodge an attack while you're in a light equip load, you lose a burn, bleed, or poison. It's good, but it's not great, and it's not terrible. It's just good, but there are certainly better perks you could have in the Amulet than this one. Moving over to our C tier perks, we have Alchemist Reprieve. The reason why I put Alchemist Reprieve in C tier, it gives you extra healing from potions. So when you drink a potion, you heal for 10% more. But as we already covered from Divine, even though it's not supposed to, Divine does also increase your healing from potions by 10%. So Divine does the exact same thing as this, but it also increases the healing from the Life Staff and Lifesteal and everything else as well. So this is strictly just potions, whereas Divine is potions and everything else. So in my opinion, I just can't see why you'd want to run this over Alchemist, why you'd want to run Alchemist Reprieve over Divine. So we're moving it down into the C tier over here. It is worth mentioning that you can have Alchemist Reprieve and Divine, but I just, again, with the S tier perks here, you've only got 3 perks on your Amulet slot. You can't get these perks on any other piece of gear, you know, other than Refreshing. So it's because it is a limited sort of real estate space, I just wouldn't waste one of those perk slots with Alchemist Reprieve personally. The same with Purify as well. This basically cleanses all debuffs off you when you get hit below 50%. I think this is a worse version of Fortified Recovery and Stamina Recovery. You've got all these different recovery perks, and I just don't think Purify really goes in there too well, cleansing all debuffs. It'd just be better to get your stamina bar back or have extra health or, you know, have the protection perk. It's not the worst perk, but it's not great. Refreshing, interestingly enough, like we talked about Refreshing being S tier on the armor. The reason why it's not great in the Amulet is, again, you want to really typically be having health protection and then one of those recovery perks or health protection Divine or something like that. So while Refreshing is good, it's just better to have it on your armor because you have like 15 different perk slots across all 5 pieces of armor. You've only got 3 perk slots on your Amulet. And you can't put protection on your armor, but you can put refreshing on your armor. So just do it, you know? Like, it's refreshing's good, but it's just not really what you want to have on the Amulet typically. And then we have Shirking Debilitate Cleanse. We already covered this. It only works while you're in a medium equip load, and just not many people are playing in a medium equip load, so it makes it quite niche, putting it down into C tier. Then we have the D tier perks here. These are the perks that really stink. You've got Alacrity, which makes your haste last longer, but you just don't really care about this unless you're going out and chopping trees or something. You don't really care about making your haste last longer. Luck, for the reason that we covered with the armor, it's just a bit of a meme perk. And then Fortified Recovery, I think this is by far the worst of the recoveries. When you're hit below 50% health, you get a 20% Fortify for 5 seconds. It's just, if this was like 10 seconds or 15 seconds, or if it was a 50% Fortify, it might be okay, but a 20% Fortify isn't actually really that special. I mean, you get 20% Fortify from just Orb of Protection from your healer, and that's available pretty much all the time. I just don't think it does enough, honestly. It just does not have enough oomph. So without the Fortify being bigger, or, you know, lasting longer, I just don't think this is worthwhile on the Amulet at all. One thing I haven't covered, by the way, I have given a little example of best in slot. So what would like a BiS Amulet look like if you're on the trading post, or if you pick one up? You know, a tank would really benefit from these, a healer from these, and then the DPS from these 3 perks. We did the same on armor as well, just just in case that helps. Moving on to ring perks here. At S tier, we have Hearty. This is like a mandatory perk on your ring. The reason behind this is because if you have Hearty, you get 110 stamina as opposed to 100 stamina. And the difference for that is pretty huge, because if we take our Hearty ring off here, so we get 10% extra max stamina. So we have 110 stamina right now. We take this down. Now we have 100 stamina. A dodge costs 50 stamina across the board. It used to be with dexterity players, they had reduced dodge cost, but now a dodge is 50 stamina. So unless you're running a spear or something very situational, you're only going to be able to do 2 dodges, and then you are exhausted and you have to quite a while for stamina to come back. But with a Hearty ring on, you can do 1, 2, and you're not exhausted yet, so you could go for a 3rd dodge. And just having access to that 3rd dodge is so useful in so many different situations. I mean, your stamina is like effectively your lifeblood of combat in New World. There's so much damage and so many mechanics that can be avoided just by pressing dodge at the right time. So giving yourself the opportunity to dodge more often with Hearty, it just becomes like a mandatory perk, basically. Next up after this, we have our damage perk. So this is fire damage, thrust damage, strike damage, slash damage. Depends what weapons you're using. If you're playing with a greatsword, for example, slash damage. Actually, keen is sometimes better. But if you're playing with a hatchet, slash damage. If you're playing with a spear, thrust damage. Just doing extra damage is pretty good for that particular main weapon that you're using. Then we have Healing Breeze and Sacred. Now, these are exclusive to healers. You don't really want to have Healing Breeze or Sacred on your tank or DPS ring. But seeing these 2 perks, like for example, a Hearty, Healing Breeze, and Sacred ring, I consider that S tier for healers. So this is where it gets a little bit tricky in New World, because you know, we've got all these different variations. Probably what I should do is make like a different tier list. So we have S through all the way to D for tank, healer, and DPS. But it was just going to be so many different variations. So I just lumped them all into S tier. But I want to be clear that, you know, Healing Breeze and Sacred, S tier for healers, probably like C tier or even D tier for tanks and DPS. Don't really get much value out of those at all. Leeching, however, is a solid perk all around. Kind of everybody can benefit from it. Just gives you a bit of lifesteal, so when you do damage, you heal. Going to be much better on your damage players. Your tank is typically getting direct heals from the healer. The healer typically doesn't need leeching because they're not really doing that much damage. But yeah, having a Hearty, damage, and leeching ring, as we covered for the DPS, is really, really good. The healer, Hearty, Sacred, and Healing Breeze, and then the tank also with a Hearty, damage, and leeching ring would be great as well. At A tier, we have Keen Awareness. I was debating whether this should go into S tier. This is a best in slot perk for greatswords, for example, because greatswords kind of want to crit as often as possible, because almost all greatsword players are playing Serenity right now, and Serenity gives you a ton of extra damage when you crit, so you want to be critting as often as possible. There are a few other builds that care about crit as well. One of the problems with Keen Awareness is if you have Keen Awareness on a ring, you can't then have damage, and if you have damage on the ring, then you can't have Keen Awareness. So there's no way right now, as far as I'm aware, to get a Hearty, slash damage, and Keen Awareness ring. Otherwise, that would be best in slot for DPS, but rings don't have those perk combinations. It's an illegal perk combination, so unless Amazon breaks the rules and introduces a new item that has 2 perks that technically shouldn't be on the same ring together, you currently can't have that, and that's why we move it down to A tier, despite it being really good. From here onwards, the perks on the ring kind of get pretty bad. It really is just like these sort of perks over here that you want to see, but I tried to, you know, categorize them in terms of, you know, maybe Burning could be good for some Fire Staff builds, Infected if you're wanting to run some Disease for anti-healing, if you need to really extend the duration of anti-healing for nature mutations, or if you're doing the final boss of Starstone Barrows and you try and put some disease on him just before he dies, and then when he comes back to life with less health because he's diseased and he receives less incoming healing. Some situational places like that, it can be a really good perk. And then we have Bloodletting, which is almost like S or A tier for rapier builds, but for everybody else, you don't really need Bloodletting that much. I wouldn't be taking it over these perks. So Bloodletting, like I say, S tier for rapier, but in other situations, so I kind of put it at B because you don't really want it for tanks or healers and most other DPS builds, but it's kind of a hard one to rate. Enfeebling, just extending the duration as your weakens. It turns out it's just really easy to keep reapplying weakens, so you don't often need that, so it goes into C tier. The same with Purifying. It's just not really good than most of these other perks over here. Purifying Heart, also a bit situational, maybe good in PvP, but typically not something you need in PvE. And then Refreshing, again, for the same reason on the Amulet, it is a good perk. Like, you do want to have 4 stacks of Refreshing, but you just certainly don't want to take Refreshing over any of these S tier perks here. You can only get Hearty on your ring, nowhere else. You can only get those damage perks on your ring. You can only get Healing Breeze on your ring, whereas Refreshing you can have on so many other different pieces of gear. I just wouldn't take it on the ring. Moving down into D tier, these are perks that I think are absolutely garbage. We have Crippling to extend the duration of slows. Maybe good in PvP, but don't really care about it in PvE. You can't even slow bosses in New World, so it doesn't do anything there. Luck is bad for the reasons that we discussed in Amulets and Armor. And then we have Poisoning, which is just very, 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 very situational as well. There's very few weapons in the game that currently apply poison. In fact, I think it might just be the Poison Shot. Is that what it's called? Poison Cloud? The ability on the bow? Poison Shot, yeah, Poison Shot. I think that, and then maybe we have the Rune Glass Gem, and I think that's it for Poison right now. So yeah, it just doesn't really work on anything in the game, and as a result, it is a D tier perk. Now, the final piece of jewelry is the earring. On the earring, I think the best in slot perks are like kind of a bit flexible. There's really not that much great stuff on the earring. I think one that is pretty good actually is Refreshing. Because the other perks on the earring aren't really that desirable, I think just freeing up a perk slot on your armor and then moving Refreshing, because you could have all of these other sort of S and A tier perks, whereas the earring isn't really that competitive. I actually don't really get excited about many perks on the earring, so I think putting Refreshing on the earring is actually pretty good. That's why it's in S tier. Despised for a tank, this is like a must-have, just getting extra threat generation. Just get it, it's really, really good. And then we have Purifying Toast, which is a great way to cleanse debuffs. You don't really have to rely on the heal or anything. When you drink a regen potion, you lose a debuff. This can be pretty good as well. And to give a little bit more clarification, like if you get hit with the root ability or you get frozen or something like that from a mutation effect, you can drink a regen potion and quickly get out of it, which, can be a game changer in some situations. Moving over to our A tier perks, we have Healthy Toast and Refreshing Toast. I was on the fence about putting Refreshing Toast into S tier, and I kind of might do it, but it just turns out Refreshing Toast has been nerfed so many times. I think at this point it's only 10% faster, so it just doesn't really make that much of a difference. Like a typical potion cooldown. I mean, if I take my earring off, this doesn't even have it. No, that would change my cooldown here actually. If I take my earring off and then we drink it, it's a 24 seconds, so it would save 2.4 seconds. And I just think often that doesn't really make that much of a difference. I don't know, Refreshing Toast might be worth considering as S tier, but again, just because it's been nerfed so many times, it's really quite a low impact perk now. Healthy Toast is a perk that I love to run as a healer because I'm often chugging mana potions, and having mana potions give me health back. I think for healers, this is probably an S tier perk, but for most other people, A tier or B tier. So, kind of landed it in an A, but yeah, you drink a mana potion, you get some health back, just some extra value on a mana potion. So if you are somebody who does drink mana potions, probably worth getting this on the earring, but I'd still, would take Refreshing over it. And we have the same problem with the earring that we have with the Enchanted Ward and the Elemental Aversion, and that all of these perks come into a particular section. They're called Consume. So Healthy Toast, Mana Toast, Purifying Toast, Empowering Toast, and Fortifying Toast, these are all competing with each other, and you're only supposed to be able to have one on your earring. There's an exception with the Artifact earring, but if you have, for example, Purifying Toast, then you can't have Healthy Toast, and so on and so forth. So that's another problem with the earring, where the perks that are actually kind of worthwhile using all are sort of competing, and you can only have one on that item. Moving into B tier, we have Regenerating. Now, I actually think this is like an S tier perk if you're playing solo. Just having health every second is just a steady way to sort of, keep yourself ticking up. And I do believe it's affected by Divine and Standing and Fortifying Sacred Grounds. Anything that increases your incoming healing, you get even more healing off of Regenerating. The problem with this in PvE is if you're not the tank, it actually generates aggro. So if the tank, you're running through a corridor filled with enemies and the tank's going first and you're behind them and your Regenerating earring is giving you health, the fact that you're healing will generate threat, and then the mobs sometimes turn onto you if the tank hasn't done any damage. So because of that reason, we can't quite give Regenerating like an A or an S tier rating, but it is a solid perk. And if you were playing solo or you're playing tank, this is absolutely S tier, I think, compared to a lot of the other perks there. Also in B tier, we have Empowering Toast. So when you drink a potion, you get a Empower, but it's got a 5-second cooldown. It's only active for 4 seconds. There is some shenanigans, and we'll cover this with Fortifying Toast, which I think is a little bit weaker because it's only 3 seconds as opposed to the 4 seconds. So they don't really last very long, but If we just take a piece of gear that has both of them on right now, the Endless Thirst here, one piece of tech that people like to talk about is you can drink a focus potion, because if I drink a health potion and then I get the proc here, so we got those two there, they don't really last very long, and then it's hard to get, we have to wait another 26 seconds, and we have to drink a very important health potion to get them to proc. Focus potions don't have a cooldown, so you can do that, and you can sort of like continuously get these buffs going all the time. However, the problem with this is, one, it's going to be expensive to keep knocking back focus potions, and the other one is like, if we do this, and then we drink a potion, and then we try and left click, it takes so long to drink the potion, and like the drinking potion animation, I think is actually going to give you a DPS loss. So like the amount of time that's spent where you're doing the glook, 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 and then you can attack, you could just be, you could have done like 2 more basic attacks in that time, which I think would actually be better than the 20% empower or 10% empower, whatever the empower is in the fortify. I just think it's wasted time. And again, the empowering toast, fortifying toast compete with healthy toast, which I think is, or purifying toast, which is going to be better. So that's why we're putting these perks at B tier and C tier respectively. They compete with purifying toast and healthy toast, and they're just kind of awkward to proc because potion drinking animations take a long time, and you don't really want to be wasting health and mana potions or burning through lots of focus potions to activate it. Healing Heart is an interesting perk. It's when you use your Heart Rune, you get a bit of health. I think if you're using the Stone Form Heart Rune, which is the one that gives you, I use it pretty often, we'll just show it on the screen here. It's the Stalwart Heart Rune of Stone Form, which gives you Fortify, and it activates a heal over time. Just having a little bit of extra burst healing on top of that with Healing Heart, I think this can be great for tanks and healers and anybody that's expecting to get bursted down. Being able to react and pop your Heart Rune and then get an extra burst of healing on top is kind of nice, but again, it's a bit situational. And sometimes people are just pressing the Heart Rune to do damage. You're pressing the Detonate or you're pressing the Vines and you're already full health. So sometimes it doesn't do anything. As a result, we put it at B tier. Fortifying Toast, we already covered. It's just, it doesn't last very long. It's kind of awkward to proc. We also have Nimble here as well. It might be worth putting Nimble up to a B tier. In fact, I think I'm going to do it. We're going to do it right now. We're going to do another change here on the fly. The problem with Nimble is it just doesn't really do that much though. Like it's a small amount of stamina regeneration. I think the difference between going from 0 to 100 stamina with and without Nimble is like 0.1 of a second or something like that. So it's like very, very, very minimal gameplay changes. Technically it is making a difference, but it's so low impact that it's not good. But I guess we go to we take a look at these other perks. I'm gonna put it into B tier, but just ends up not really being that good. Then we have Luck over here. It's still bad for the same reasons that we covered with your ring perks and your armor perks and your amulet perks. Just please run something other than Luck. And then we have Duplicating Toast, which says when you drink a potion, there's a chance that the potion doesn't get consumed. Now, I used to think that, that would mean if I drink a health potion, it would mean that the health potion doesn't actually get consumed, so I get the heal, and it doesn't go on cooldown. But what it means is it goes on cooldown, but instead of going from 98 down to 97, I stay at 98 potions. But that's, again, just, potions are relatively cheap, so I don't think, I mean, maybe it's a good way to save some gold, so you might want to consider it if you're playing like a economy version of New World or something like that, which, a few people are, but it's just a very, very, very low impact perk. It doesn't do anything for actually helping in combat. It's just saving you a bit of gold, which, again, not really the most group-orientated friendly perk that you could run in that sense. So Duplicating Toast going into the D tier as a result. All right, taking a look at the length of this video so far, I think we're already at least 30 minutes deep here, so this is going to take quite a while to get through all these perks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link in the description down below, and if you guys would like, we can have a further discussion in a separate video. Just let me know in the comments down below, leave a like or anything like that as a way to show that you enjoyed this one. If we see enough sort of request or engagement or interaction, we can go ahead and make a separate video talking about why some of these perks are in A, B, C, and D tier. One thing that I do want to note, just to cover, if you are going to take a look at the links to the spreadsheet in the description down below, the perks that I put an asterisk next to, these are really good perks, but they're often so good that you typically want to put them on your weapon, because if you put an ability perk on your weapon, it's even more powerful than it would be on the armor. So just bear that in mind. I'm saying Putrefying Scream is great to have on your armor, but it's even better to have on your weapon. The same with Mending Protection, Fortifying Sacred Ground. so on and so forth. Enfeebling Skewer is another classic one where it's a really, really good perk, but it's so good that it's actually kind of bad on the armor because you just want to have it on your weapon instead, and the perks don't stack together. So yeah, tried to cover a little bit of this here and break it down and then explain what's going on because there is quite a lot of stuff in here. But I think that's going to do it for today's video, friends. Let me know what you guys think about these tier lists down below. Like I say, we do have another one for weapons as well, so I'll have a link to the weapons tier list in the description down below. I am going to update these as we move through Season 4 and into Season 5. So if you enjoyed this video and you found it useful, please, friends, consider the old subscribe button. It does help us out here on YouTube. You know, it means people are more likely to see the videos. Leaving a like or a comment as well also puts it more into the recommended feed so we can, you know, continue to do this stuff. And as always, friends, I will catch you guys all in the next video.